A very good day to everybody listening into my presentation. My name is Barbara Hofer, and in today's talk I will be speaking about creating spaces for an inclusive multilingual pedagogy with English. Now, very briefly an outline, I will be speaking about the role of language teaching in general and English language teaching in specifics and a possible need for a reorientation or else a multilingual approach to English language teaching. I will outline the benefits of multilingual approaches and present some research that was conducted in the province of Bolzano. Now, what is the initial condition, the status quo? Initial condition, of course, a term borrowed from dynamic systems theory, which provides the theoretical background to my research. The situation is such that in most classrooms in Italy, in South Tyrol, Europe-wide, worldwide, we have increasingly multilingual student populations. And what that means is that monolingualism-informed pedagogies do not do justice to this new multilingual and multicultural community of learners. So what is needed is a redefinition and overhaul of language teaching, also English language teaching, a true paradigm shift, so to speak, and that obviously also requires new approaches to or new conceptions of what we mean by linguistic competency. Now, the literature is unequivocal. Monolingual competence is different from multilingual competence. Grosjean was one of the first to point that out. He compared the multilingual to a hurdler and noted that the hurdler differs from the sprinter and the high jumper in that he or she develops very different skills. In very much the same way, Vivian Cook argued that the L2 user is a speaker in her or his own right, a functional multilingual and a competent speaker and not a deficient speaker. Ferdinand Jessner at Innsbruck University similarly points to the different competences, the new properties, new qualities that multilingual children, speakers develop as a function of their being multilingual. So what are the characteristics then of the multilingual learner user? They are very clearly different from speakers of one or even two languages. They have knowledge, command of several so-called named languages. They rarely have balanced competences in those languages, and that's an important point that as teachers we need to bear in mind. They have different uses of languages. They often mix, they borrow from other languages or previously learned languages. They switch to other languages. They just process languages differently for the very reason that they have to juggle multiple codes. So all in all, a very complex system, a different system from the monolingual and bilingual system. So how do we accommodate these new speakers? What approaches are there? We have already said that a monolingual oriented approach to teaching, a monolingual habitus, does not do justice to this new community of learners. If we are being serious about accommodating all the students and creating fair and equal conditions for learners, then we need more integrative, more inclusive approaches, multilingual approaches, holistic approaches. That means that we have to give more weight to the languages that the children bring to school. We have to work across language borders. We have to give more visibility to also small languages, have to acknowledge their presence, value these languages. This does, of course, not mean that the teacher has to master these languages, but it just means including them in the classroom. And that also entails doing away with hierarchies, with the monopoly, perhaps, of the majority language, and replace the so-called native speaker model with a more realistic model, which is the multi-competent user. And this entails in turn that we shift the focus from what children, learners, students cannot do to what they are able to do. Now, multilingual approaches have been addressed in different contexts worldwide. Hawkins, to name just one, with the language awareness approach in the United Kingdom, the curriculum multilingualism in Austria, Common Reich, for example, Hofer with her whole school curriculum in Germany, and so on, the translingual approaches that you are all probably familiar with. Now, in Italy, or Italy and South Tyrol in particular, are, it might be fair to say, lagging somewhat behind, but there are some positive examples that we can point to. We do in South Tyrol, for instance, have some multilingual integrated approaches in some schools. There is a tendency to apply these approaches more in Italian language schools than in German language schools. In one Italian language school, we have the Riflessione Lingua class, which is a special class where teachers who teach German, Italian and English are together in the classroom, and children work across languages. They compare linguistic structures and forms and develop a deeper understanding of how languages work and relate to one another. Then we have two German primary schools, one in the capital, Bolzano, which offers multilingual alphabetization and again works from first grades onwards in a very integrated way, including the languages that children bring to school, but also working across the curricular languages, and a similar approach in a primary school in Brunico, where children have special cross-language workshops integrated in their timetables, and for about 4 hours a week they work across different languages, curricular languages mainly. But teachers always try to include heritage languages as well. And then of course the Latin schools in the province. Latin schools work or are based on a system of language parity, which means that lessons are divided up per language. There is teaching in all 4 languages: Latin, German, Italian and English, of course. Now, what are the benefits of such holistic multilingual approaches? Children develop, as we have already said, a better understanding of how languages work and relate to one another. They develop an enhanced meta and cross-linguistic ability or awareness, enhanced monitor functions also, meaning they notice different things about languages more easily, more quickly perhaps than monolinguals. They also develop a certain communicative flexibility in multilingual contexts, for example, mediating skills, translating, conveying meaning between speakers of different languages. They learn or develop a habit of reflecting on languages and language use. They are very good at decoding new languages, as we will see in a moment. They also develop enhanced metacognitive abilities, meaning the ability to reflect on and also then verbalize their multilingual or cross-linguistic reflections. And they are very good at applying different strategies and at improving their own learning based on their language learning awareness. And they also, as a result of all of these benefits, develop into more autonomous learners, more independent learners. Now, all of this is supported by the so-called Common Underlying Processing System, which was presented or proposed by Cummins and also Kesh and Papp, which rests on the assumption that skills, abilities, strategies acquired in one language can be transferred to other languages. And yes, this has been received in the scholarly community and is still is still often referred to. Now, the benefits that I just pointed out are also supported by research that we carried out in South Tyrol. Here I want to refer to two studies, a 2015 study which investigated primary schoolers in Italian language schools, and the 2022 study which was conducted in 10 German language schools and investigated 5th graders. And in both studies we found significant differences between pupils in multilingual versus traditional schooling, which goes to say that multilingual integrated pedagogy does pay off. Now, very quickly, the 2015 study found that learners in multilingual programs have higher metalinguistic awareness. They attain better result in their first, second and third language, meaning Italian, German and English, and they also exhibited strong multi-competence, meaning the ability to work across languages. In the 2022 study, we similarly investigated multilingual competences in primary schoolers, this time in German language schools, and we looked into multilingual versus mainstream education programs and compared children in those two programs. And what we found was that the children in the multilingual programs did significantly better. Now, how did we proceed? We used several background questionnaires on attitudes, motivation, strategy use, language tests in German, Italian and English, and a multilingual competence test, which you can see here on the left. The cover you can see. The test is composed of two components, a linguistic and a metalinguistic component, and children had to work on two parts. The first part concentrating on the curricular languages, German, Italian and English, and the second part on 6 new languages, including Danish, French, Latin, Swedish, Dutch, etc. So languages that they had never encountered before. And in addition, we also interviewed 42 of the children. What we found was that the children in multilingual education programs outperformed the children in traditional education programs on the multilingual test. That was a very promising finding. We also found that all the children developed some degree of metalinguistic competence, but of course there was a significant advantages for those children who were trained in working across languages and who were used to working with different languages. Similar findings were reported by Spechtenhauser. She also conducted her research in South Tyrol. She investigated lower secondary school children, again in traditional and multilingual programs, and she also found, as we had before, significant advantages for the children who benefited from multilingual training. I do apologize, my video stopped here, but I'll just continue from here. So we said that multilingual training needs to be promoted because it has all of the benefits I just outlined. And now I cannot go on, but the desiderata that you would probably see in my presentation are that schools promote multilingual education to a much higher degree, that schools offer multilingual training in order to make sure that all children increase their learning in school, also children with heritage languages, and that all children are prepared for a multilingual life reality. And with that, I end my presentation and I thank you very much for your attention.